Fascism, defined as a far-right authoritarian political ideology characterized by the idea of nation rebirth, suppression of individuality, unwavering loyalty to a mythic nation that must remain dominant, exclusion of those perceived as dangers to the nation's purity, militarism, and most importantly, dictatorial leadership. From the beginning of the 1920s to 1945, we saw the most two influential instances of fascism: the National Fascist Party by Benito Mussolini and the Nazi Party by Adolf Hitler. The latter, which, while not purely fascist as it includes racial ideology, still held very similar beliefs to fascism. Through these two instances, history has taught and continues to teach many people around the world just how destructive fascism is to not just a country, but to humanity itself. A lesson that creator David James Armsby demonstrates as well through his indie animated series on YouTube, Autodale. The series surrounds a town controlled by a centralized hive mind in order to control its citizens into specific, rigid roles in order for their society to function properly, and enforced by tall, robotic handymen in order to ensure that all citizens remain safe, obedient, and pretty. Today, I will be analyzing Autodale in order to showcase the many intricacies of fascism that it demonstrates through its beautiful black and white visuals and thought-provoking execution of show don't tell. Quick disclaimer before we get started, however, this video will contain sensitive themes of genocide, discrimination, child indoctrination, brainwashing, psychological torture, and more themes that may be triggering to some. If you feel these themes may be uncomfortable, please feel free to click off the video. I would also like to mention that I am aware that fascism in this current political climate is a charged topic to many. This video, however, is not meant to be a political commentary of real-life events and is solely meant to be an educational analysis of fascism in Autodale. I am not taking any side, and I also do not claim myself to be an expert when it comes to fascism. This series simply motivated me to look more into the topic to properly educate myself, especially since for my own story that I am writing takes elements of fascism, which as a result motivates me to represent and write it in an accurate, authentic way. If you'd like to know more about fascism, please feel free to look at the resources I have linked below, and feel free to comment after the video if you have any additional information on the topic. Now with that out of the way, let us delve into the haunting allegory of Autodale and how it represents the dangers of fascism. To suppress one's individuality is to deny a person's expression of their interests, their beliefs, or any measure of independent thought or action that is separate from what is mandated and approved of by the ruling authority. Suppression, however, does not just come in the form of physical violence. It often comes in many subtler ways, such as propaganda and indoctrination, the two that I mentioned being direct uses that the city of Autodale uses to strip its citizens of their individuality. Psychological manipulation that forces them only into the rigid roles and thought patterns that the city of Autodale has deemed acceptable. Propaganda and indoctrination are showcased perfectly in the episodes Children's Toys and Model Citizen. To begin with Children's Toys, the episode is themed around how imagination is a dangerous thing, and how toys, such imaginative and wondrous things, influence a child and enable their imagination.
Imagination. So powerful. Your children are full of it. Always having their minds drift off into the wondrous and magical expanse of their creativity. Often visualizing brilliant and terrible things. Impossible things. It's a dangerous thing, imagination. But an amazing thing.
It is why to the city of Autodale it is seen as a threat because it allows people, especially children, to visualize brilliant and terrible things, impossible things, one of the many impossible things being the horrors that Autodale actually brings upon its citizens in reality. An imaginative thought that Autodale cannot allow to exist freely, for it risks divergence from what is mandated thinking from the city, which is why as a way to indoctrinate, they use toys to help children think the way they should be thinking, the correct way to think, because as they say themselves,
Toys! Such imaginative and wondrous things. Toys shape and influence your child as they grow. Mean toys may make them bullies. Soft toys may make them queer. Have your child grow up with the correct influences. Have your child grow up pretty.
Through the 9-inch handyman doll introduced, it reinforces the idea of being pretty into the hearts and minds of children. To be pretty for little boys is to grow up to provide for their family and kick their feet up while reading the newspaper. Nothing else. And to be pretty for little girls, to grow up to cook, clean, and read their children bedtime stories, to be the housemaiden. Nothing else. but for both overall to build families of their own and be pretty on their own, nothing else. The handyman uses what they call 5 memorable phrases, such as, "You're safe here in Autodale. Are we sitting comfortably? There are no monsters here. Play safe, children. You're pretty." To normalize the approved thought pattern of Autodale, because children only grow up to hear those patterns as their only natural options. Similarly to Benito Mussolini's regime introducing the Balilla youth organization, designed to train boys to be loyal soldiers and girls to be obedient mothers, as well as schools emphasizing physical training, obedience, and glory to the state, discouraging any form of individual expression. Therefore, suppressing the possibility of imaginative, divergent thought by not only excluding the thoughts of things not approved by Autodale, therefore teaching kids that those thoughts either don't exist or don't matter, but also by utilizing positive reinforcement. Through toys like the Handyman, they positively reinforce the idea of only approved ideas by Autodale as a positive association and an overall good thing by connecting them to the toys, because toys are associated with fun and rewards. Positive things additionally reinforced as well by the Handyman's play feature and colorful lights, painting the robotic handymen as they patrol Autodale as safe aspects of daily life, especially through repetition, as repeating the exposure of the same messages over and over again as kids play with the handymen glorifies obedience to Autodale's idea of being pretty into children, because they will then naturally connect happiness and belonging with serving with the state. The toy masks indoctrinate during play. They train kids to equate safety, joy, and belonging and conformity to their assigned roles in order to be pretty. They act out the thinking said by the handymen, making indoctrination active, practice their assigned roles and thinking for when they become adults, effectively making it become muscle memory, rehearsed through play. And most dangerously of all, in my opinion, it gets them to develop internalized surveillance. Why survey them externally through things like the robotic handymen to make sure they are being pretty, when through the handyman toys, it teaches them to survey themselves, make them police themselves into questioning whether they are safe, pretty, or doing what they should be doing. Such as when the little girl questioned themselves when they saw the bloodstain on the handyman, to question the conforming narrative of "there are no monsters here," only for her to shake her independent thought from her brain.
Toys. Such imaginative and wondrous things.
Imagination.
Because due to the approved thinking from the handyman doll being positively reinforced into her mind from constant repetition, it rigidly resulted in her concluding that such dangerous thoughts of the handyman making people unsafe was an impossible thing. Therefore, successfully making dissent unimaginable, and by extension suppressing the concept of imagination by framing it as a dangerous thing, to seek safety in the ruling authority because in their minds, that's all they know. That's the only thing they should know. Indoctrination also does not apply to just toys, but also in what children and even adults consume passively, like television and the robotic handyman, which is greatly presented in the episode Model Citizen. This episode introduces the concept of the model citizen, on top of being pretty, a providing father and a caring mother. They'll mask their subtle normalization of the concept under the guise of helpfulness, not just with the smiley masks that they wear every day to artificially reinforce positivity into themselves, but they'll also mask it with a cute mascot on the television telling kids what to be and only to be for the rest of their lives. And it works because friendliness breeds vulnerability. Because how could the friendly, caring, and helpful handyman on TV be wrong? He's only here to help. Night after night, the handymen check on the families of Autodale in their houses, subtly enforcing the system and an expectation to be pretty.
Greetings, Mr. and Mrs. Robinson. Daily check. How are we doing tonight?
Well, work was a delight.
Oh, dinner was just wonderful.
And Junior's just been tucked in.
Splendid! Taking after his father, I'd hope. Seems everything's in order.
Oh, leaving so soon.
Wouldn't care to join my lovely lady for a dance, would you, Joe?
One day, Mrs. Robinson, not today.
Aww.
You disappointed the lady, Joe.
Deepest apologies, Robinson family, but duty calls. It would seem the cycle never ends.
Normalizing the system and breeding conformity amongst everyone because they're not doing any harm. They're just checking up on everyone to make sure they're okay. They're only there to make sure you're staying pretty because they care, and they care indeed. Very much so. Not only that, but they'll also represent that they care through the friendly shadow, a robot designed to be human. To represent that even a robot that would naturally run on logic can feel and think like a human.
After what happened here, you're going to be taken away, and you're...
I know. My daughter's been taken, and my husband's dead. I've failed.
I'm sorry.
Just promise me my daughter will be okay.
If your daughter's
No.
alive, I'll...
Promise me she'll be okay after you save her. Promise me she'll be joining her brothers and not me. Please.
I promise.
You're a lot less scary without the coat.
Alongside the hive mind, a collection of citizens that broke free of the system's indoctrination due to their exceptionalism, but in the end found the system fascinating. If beings that think and are human, free of the system's tricks, still ultimately agree with the system, then what other proof do you need of the system's validity? It is that repetition and logic that breeds conformity, and they'll praise them for it, saying they are the only ones that keep Autodale running, congratulating them for conforming to the system so blindly, for imprisoning themselves in a prison that they don't even know they are in, all so that they can feel good, feel like they are doing the right thing, so that when the time comes for the pretties that become old to eventually become ugly and taken away, the victims welcome their fate with open arms, because they've been indoctrinated throughout their entire lives so much the system has become successfully normalized. This is all just a part of the cycle. By the time they are taken away, citizens no longer resist, because indoctrination has taught them that true individuality is dangerous, and that obedience and even death is the only path to being pretty. No debate, no further insight, and no uncertainty. Just conformity. The idea of excluding threats is to separate or eliminate individuals that potentially pose a threat to the nation's purity within its selected pure population. In the case of fascism, the nation is imagined as pure, and that it is the moral obligation of the nation to remove anything considered impure, therefore justifying their exclusion whether the reality is true or not. However, despite the horrific actions that Autodale does to its citizens behind the scenes, there is admittedly reason behind why they do what they do to so-called uglies, as revealed at the end of the series. The city of Autodale is actually a secluded city amidst a post-apocalyptic world due to an unknown disease ravaging it for years before the events of the series. A mysterious goddess known as the Matriarch then appeared to a group of survivors, and with her power was able to cure a little girl of the disease. However, it also is revealed that she is dying as well, risking herself the only cure to the disease ravaging Earth before being lost forever. As a result, this character, known as the Mayor, finds a way to keep her alive by supplying her body with biological material, or more simply, human blood. Of course, in order to make such a method last for the foreseeable future, you would need vast amounts of human blood. This is when the Mayor had the idea of Autodale, a city literally held together by the blood of its citizens, as the Mayor engineered the social constructs known as pretties and uglies, the pure and the impure. Constructs that were made in order to create a self-sustaining machine of a city to keep all the systems of the city in working order, and to create an endless supply of nutrients to keep the matriarch alive. Constructs created to distract the masses from the real societal problem by pinning the problem with society onto amongst themselves that are supposedly contributing to it. The pretties being those that uniformly fall into their mandated roles, men being the workers that maintain working order.
Children, look around the room. Look at your father. He likes to read the newspaper and kick his feet up after a hard day's work. He provides for your family. Your father is pretty.
And women being the maidens that take care of the next generation of workers, those workers being their children.
And then, children, look at your mother. Isn't her cooking splendid? She also keeps the house clean and she reads you bedtime stories every night. Your mother is pretty. And now, children, look at yourselves. You're young, you laugh, you play, you may scrape your knees from time to time. You have friends, you and your friends get up to all sorts of playful mischief. One day, children, you will grow up to be just like one of your parents, and you will build a family of your own. One day, you will be pretty.
And uglies being those that are seen as not compatible or even dangerous to the stability of Autodale, those being disabled people, queer people, the mentally ill, and even old people, pretties that have lost their value once they become too old.
But alas, children, not everyone is pretty. Some are ugly. We don't want uglies, do we, children? You are ugly. You are ugly. You are ugly. We take the uglies away, so that you and your friends and your neighbors and your family can stay pretty.
A disturbingly similar system to Hitler's own racial hierarchy, with the Aryan race being the master race and the purest race of them all the way down to groups like the Untermensch consisting of the same groups of people as Autodale's system, except for old people and religious people like the Jews. Artificial labels to separate those that are subhuman and to make enemies of them for racial unification of the Aryan race. Autodale's pretties and uglies being a delicate system that relies on a constant balance of pretties and uglies to be available to satisfy the needs of both the city and the matriarch. So in order to maintain this balance, the routine cycle of each gender of the pretties enforced with the man going to work to support his family and the woman staying at home to maintain the household and raise the children, ensuring that their minds are preoccupied with the societal expectations laid upon them so as to not be able to think outside of said societal expectations. However, alongside the cycle, enforcement of propaganda and fear of being ugly is ingrained into the hearts and minds of its citizens to convince them that this system is okay, that it is the only way to live in order to prevent becoming unsafe. Previously mentioned before, propaganda on television would be used like PSAs to legitimize the system, to emotionally manipulate the masses. They'll use language such as,
"We don't want uglies, do we, children?"
to morally weigh and make people desperate to be pretty because Autodale through PSAs like this one gives so much meaning to the artificial category of being pretty because they're so heavily tied to being safe and good, that they internalize the need for the system without the need for external reinforcement. A key element that allows fascism to thrive, the ability for people to allow themselves to close their minds off from their own critical thinking and fall back into the simpler existence of doing what you are told because it is told to you that it is good and necessary. Because the one thing that almost everyone desires above all else is to be happy, a fact that the mayor doesn't even exploit because the desire to be happy does not mean weakness, but the right to feel good about oneself. The key being that the mayor has twisted the meaning of wanting to be happy to mean something entirely different to suit his own purposes. It is always easier to live in ignorance, to live in isolation from the complexity of reality because it seems blissful, which I don't even necessarily blame people for wanting or jumping at the chance of. There are many things in life in general that even I willfully choose to stay away from interacting for the sake of blissful ignorance because it can seem so overwhelming to the point of detriment to your own well-being. However, for almost everyone in Autodale, the idea of happiness via the exclusion of external threat of uglies has been ingrained in their minds so deep that when the city inevitably needs more nutrients for the matriarch, the people, or uglies, are taken away and excluded from society without a second thought. And once they are excluded, they are not only outside of society, but stripped of all their value. Literally spilling their own blood, not as a death sentence, but as civic duty, because indoctrination has made their exclusion a necessary aspect of life, something to take pride in to keeping the machine of Autodale running, thanking those that bring upon their death after all they have done, because in the end, that is all they are allowed to be. Fuel for the machine.
Thank you, Joe. Deepest apologies, Robinsons. Duty calls. I'm afraid Autodale is hardly automatic. And your families toys are what keep our engines
Turning and turning. Let us hope that this perfect cycle never ends.
Militarism is the belief or desire by the government or people that a nation should maintain a strong military capability in order to defend or promote the nation's interests, many times in aggressive ways. With the many variables of pretties and uglies comes the need for a way to enforce control over all of them, something to step in when they step out of line. Because with a large population in a city like Autodale, it's bound to have those that wish to go against the system and cause trouble, as seen in the episode No Monsters. In comes the robotic handyman, who I'll just be referring to as just the handyman, the autonomous robots created to protect Autodale's citizens, to check up on them, enforce them, make sure they're all doing a-okay, make sure they fall in line. Only the most noble of intentions, because the handymen don't just enforce laws through violence, they are the eyes of the system. A constant reminder that citizens are never truly alone. Even when they aren't attacked, the mere presence of the handymen keep people in line, because in Autodale, surveillance is not only a weapon, but also a tool. Very much similar to the Gestapo, a secret police force created by the Nazis that encouraged citizens to report neighbors and family for suspicious or disloyal behavior, creating a culture of internalized surveillance. To tie this to a theoretical concept developed by French philosopher Michael Foucault, Foucault's panopticon, as it is named, describes the concept as the idea that when people are believing they are always under observation, they internalize control and behave. It helps support the system even after the handymen are out of the picture, because the citizens themselves will continue to police themselves. Of course, not that they have to, as with propaganda like the handyman doll, they help to glorify the handyman's presence by making them appear like guardians of peace and protection, making the thought of them actually being to the people's detriment a silly thought at that, something to shake from their mind in order to continue living in naive bliss under the guise of safety. Though I hear you ask, how is it that Autodale can get away with such militaristic surveillance of its citizens with no pushback? Well, not only through indoctrination via propaganda of the internal scapegoats that they call uglies, which while is a superficial category at the end of the day, there is also a real external threat that looms outside the walls of Autodale that actively frighten the citizens. This threat are known as the Freaks, introduced in the episode Don't Feed the Freaks. Tall, wandering humanoid creatures that are implied to be humans mutated due to the disease that affected the world prior, though the only relevant information to know is that Autodale in their PSA frames them as brainless monsters, hell-bent on mindlessly killing those that live inside the city's walls. Despite the episode Next, Friendly Shadow, showing that they have some amount of human intellect and can be friendly with humans, such as the one that befriended the little girl in the episode, it doesn't change the fact that Autodale regardless uses them as yet another scapegoat to justify the handyman. It doesn't help that the Freaks are also not all that friendly, as they can grow aggressive and violent when provoked, an irrelevant fact in the eyes of the Autodale, as all they need is proof that they are violent no matter the context to fuel their narrative about them. Militarism in Autodale isn't simply about protection, but about manufacturing fear to justify absolute control and violence, moralizing the latter as a form of civic duty and their killings as a kindness. But the handymen exist as both guardians and executioners, yet their roles are presented as inseparable because Autodale has made the two purposes indistinguishable. Threats, like the uglies and the freaks, ensure that no one ever questions the system, and when people do start to question, they are promptly wiped out with no resistance. Just as fascist regimes glorify their military and invent enemies, Autodale ensures obedience to the ever-prevalent shadow of control and violence looming over its citizens. When it comes to any form of government, it needs a leader, or in Autodale's case of fascism, a dictator, defined as a ruler with absolute power over a nation, or in this case, a city, often with the use of force. The mayor is our case study. The mayor represents the classic fascist dictator, a man who believes he alone has the vision to save his people and thus assumes the right to decide the fate of everyone else. His cheery slogans and smiling masks disguise brutality beneath, but that is the essence of dictatorial leadership, cruelty justified as necessity, packaged as kindness, creating a prison for which its prisoners can see the outside that surrounds them, but not the walls that confine them. All the while delusionally justifying to himself, wrapping his head around lies that even he himself cannot bear to do alone anymore. Like how Hitler's many policies would be justified as necessary evils for the survival of Germany, only in his case he took it a step further ideologically, as he also believed he was a divine savior type of figure. However, his example is still relevant when in comparison with the mayor, with the difference being he himself personally believed that he was divine, while both the actions of the mayor and Hitler remained the same, at the very least conceptually. But back onto my main point. When Autodale's exceptional girl finally saw through the veil of deceit, the mayor saw it as an opportunity to solidify his beliefs, because in his own words,
After enough isolation and time come many doubts. I have brought you here for a fresh perspective. Perhaps you, Autodale's exceptional girl, can forgive my necessary sins.
because even after many years of feeling burdened by his horrific creation, by all the atrocities and lies he's done and told, he almost felt disappointed. So imagine his glee when someone of equal vision to himself fueled his justification and even encouraged it to a new level.
But after seeing all of the atrocities, hearing all the necessary lies, he almost seemed disappointed. But I began to find it all really rather impressive.
Though whether or not this was simply a manipulation tactic of his is up for debate, though I don't believe this to be the case. His path, all from the very beginning, was paved with good intentions. As far as we know, he never desired power or subjugation of others. He was simply responding to a threat the only way he thought necessary when a solution appeared before him, and somewhere along the way his good intentions mutated him into something unrecognizable.
You must understand. The world outside is sick. She is all that keeps us safe. A beacon of the old world.
An admirable goal from the beginning, to be sure, deep down in whatever is left of him before he strayed from his original path, but ultimately never a justification for what he has done. He may have done what he did because he thought it was the only solution. He may have thought it necessary to put all those cheery voices, pretty faces, and spat out lies in order to bring about what he thought was kindness, but it was never his right. It was never his right to strip a person of their free will, their individuality because of what he thought was best, regardless of their intentions or reasoning. To strip someone of their autonomy is to enact absolute control over a person's ability to be an individual, which leads him to enact the crime of dictatorship, not merely taking lives, but taking away the very possibility of living as an individual, a human, to the point where what even is the point of being a human? A question very much reflected in his design, going from a frail yet well-meaning man of science to ironically a freak of his attempt to keep himself immortal with what appears to be the essence of the matriarch, so determined to do what it takes to preserve humanity that he's barely human himself, if at all. Which brings me to ask, does he himself even know who he's even really doing this for? Sure, he tells himself he's doing it for the citizens of Autodale, but who are the citizens of Autodale really? A bunch of people simply carrying out their assigned roles every day, day in and day out, over and over again, like cogs to a machine? I wouldn't classify that as individual or human, and isn't that the people he was trying to save in the first place? Humanity from the plague of the old world? Perhaps I'm simply overthinking things. Maybe his vision has never been tainted to begin with. Maybe he does still see the ultimate good that he desired all those years ago still in that mind of his. Maybe there is still self-awareness in his soul. But I do know this. Whatever words he could possibly spit to explain or justify anything of what he has done will never outweigh his actions. Because despite what he would say when confronted with what he's done from a firm, opposing perspective, in his eyes, the citizens of Autodale exist only as fuel for the system he has created. And in that vision, Autodale becomes not only a city, but a prison built on obedience. His voice inescapable, his will inescapable, even if he never shows himself. Of course, he never needed to show himself in the first place. Not once. After all, with those cheery voices, those cheery faces, there are no monsters here. They do all the work for him, institutionalizing his presence, institutionalizing his kindness, all for the purpose of one main, distinct goal. As I mentioned in the beginning, fascism is an ideology, a dangerous one at that. However, an important thing to note is that ideologues that subscribe to fascism do not follow it solely out of personal ambition or ego. Rather, because they believe that the nation they live in or even oversee is greatly flawed, a belief that can certainly be applied to the mayor. This can be due to many reasons, such as the idea that the nation has lost its former glory, has become overcome by weakness, or has been corrupted to the detriment of the nation's greatness. This belief in rebirth through sacrifice reflects what historians describe as palingenetic nationalism, and its reasons can come from a variety of ideas and beliefs. The most prominent example being from Hitler believing that the Aryan race or the master race have been denied the opportunity to rule the world as their destiny by the inferior Untermensch, including people of color, Slavic people, homosexuals, and most prominently Jews. However, despite how flawed the reasonings I present are as history has shown us, the core idea of the nation being flawed still persists as the dominant ideological motivation for fascists, resulting in the idea that the nation is dying, and that drastic measures must be taken to bring back the nation's greatness, to bring forth a rebirth of the nation, which is almost always the main motivation that justifies the atrocities that fascists commit, a case no different for the mayor. For Autodale, the idea of the nation dying is quite literal. The mysterious disease ravaged the land before the arrival of the matriarch. Humanity was dying at an alarming rate, a bleak truth that has served as motivation for the mayor to commit all that he has done, framing the old world as diseased, ruined, and unsafe.
You must understand. The world outside is sick.
And that the matriarch is what will keep humanity going, to rebirth it from ruination.
She is all that keeps us safe. A beacon of the old world.
A constant, ever-looping justification, just like the constant, ever-looping renewal of blood for the matriarch. One that can withstand the strength of deliberation and debate that challenges the need and purpose of the atrocities committed because of that justification. As in the eyes of people like the mayor, it is all for the greater good. A reality that in the case of Autodale does unfortunately have some truth to it, as the city of Autodale, the nation, is at risk of succumbing to the same fate of dying to whatever disease ravaged humanity. It does not justify any of the mayor's actions, but it does serve to further illuminate his motivation that the world, or at least the citizens of Autodale, must continue to be safe no matter what, that the nation must be reborn. I do not interpret the mayor's character as someone who sees himself as a tool of providence, but I do interpret him as someone who sees himself as a savior, one who is burdened with the responsibility of saving what is left of humanity from succumbing to the horrors he witnessed all those years ago. And in the beginning he may have sympathetic motivations, but over time it has become clear that those motivations have long since passed, and it is entirely fair to judge him as the man or thing that he has become now after all those years. Unfortunately, his actions will serve as a cycle that will continue on for many years to come, not only because of his own personal motivation, but also from those who enable and believe what he deems is a necessary evil. Because ultimately, despite everything Autodale had to become to keep the matriarch alive, despite everything the mayor has done,
it was all necessary. And those cheery voices voices, those pretty faces. There are no monsters here. The lies we spit. They monsters hide are a kindness.
Fascism is not an easy concept to see, identify, or understand. As history has shown, it is a system that is deceptively built but inevitably cannot function without the unified conformity of the people to whatever system enforces against them, a fact that I think the series captures masterfully. Autodale is a great representation of the dangers of fascism and an overall great series with not just its inspired and well-executed writing, but also its art direction. Its stellar 3D animation of black and white visuals, which I would argue has some artistic significance as a lack of color means a lack of emotion, because colors are tied to the emotional spectrum. So to have no color at all would mean a lack of emotion, meaning easier suppression of individuality that springs from emotion. Its animation process is also based on a quite fascinating design process of sculpting out the assets brought to life in animation from real life first, which is delved in further detail in David Armsby's behind-the-scenes videos of the series. Not to mention the music composition that blends seamlessly with the pacing and presentation of the series to leave you both horrified yet intrigued in the end at this dystopian world that David Armsby, or Dead Sound, has created. All mixed together to present a series that entrances you in a world filled with horrors ever so parallel to real life. A world that I hope one day is revisited by David, as I would love to see more, particularly of Autodale's humble beginnings before growing into what it is today. I am very happy to have covered this series, and I think it has really broadened my horizons on fascism as I conducted research for this analysis. In fact, regarding the mayor, I do intend to make a full analysis video on his character in the future since he intrigues me very much, so stay tuned for that video. Again, I am not an expert. I simply tried my best to analyze and explain my thoughts on what I deem to be a representation of fascism and a piece of media I enjoy. Ultimately, these are just my thoughts, so let me know yours down in the comments below, and I'll see you all in the next video.